All right, we are recording. Thank you all for joining me today for what is, I believe, our fourth training in this Lean Leadership series. And today we're going to be talking about a topic that I've also touched in the um, Lean Learning series, but we're going to be taking a little bit more leadership-oriented view on visual management. Now, we're going to be spending a lot of time talking about Microsoft Planner, but we're going to be talking about what visual management means a little bit more broadly as well. So I want to start by asking some questions, and I'd like it if you could show me by a show of hands. Imagine a hypothetical where the commissioner of whatever whatever department you are a part of, requests a status update on every project your entire team is working on within the next 5 minutes. So you have to deliver something in 5 minutes that says what all of the projects your team is working on. I want you to give me a show of hands if you think you could deliver that. All right. I'm not seeing any hands. That's not unusual, right? So primarily the way we communicate our statuses is through in-person, or in this case, meeting type communications. So let's go ahead and ask a question. Go ahead and raise your hand if you require a regular meeting to know what your team is up to. So that can be a staff meeting, or it can be a one-on-one. Just go ahead and raise your hand if that's your primary mode of knowing what the status of a given project is. All right, I'm seeing a lot of hands coming up. So that's not unusual. That is primarily what we spend our standing meetings doing, is finding out what the status of a project is, how are things going, and that's a paradigm that I think we can evolve, and we have the tools on hand to explore that. So I'm going to ask you one more question. And it's vaguely speaking, what percent of your check-ins or staff meetings are primarily devoted to providing progress updates? So, and Josh added, yes, also daily reports. That's another method that is a little less in person, but still very much an update. So go ahead and type in chat what percent of your meetings are status updates, or one-on-ones where you're asking how are your projects going, or things like that. All right. So I'm seeing a range, but generally people are putting in the 70 to 75% range. That is a lot of time to spend communicating with people, describing of all of the things that I'm doing, how is that going? How far into it am I? How much longer do I have left to go? Those are all things that I might know, but my boss does not know. They need to know that for a lot of reasons. It's important for a manager and supervisor to know what their team is working on, how those things are going, and what the progress of those things are. But we are dedicating a lot of our time to find that information out, whether that's in staff meetings, in one-on-ones, in reporting. So when we're talking about visual management, we're talking about what are some other ways that we can see that progress happening. So we're talking about visual management today, but there are actually a lot of different kinds of visual management. So today we're going to be talking about what is a Kanban board and what can it do. We're going to be talking primarily about Microsoft Planner, which is a tool that Vermont State employees all have access to. But it can also mean standardized work, signs, dashboards, quality standards. This is an example of a visual management board that combines a lot of different elements. So little, you can see it's very low tech. This was built before the pandemic started. It's just a bulletin board behind my desk, but it displays things that are of interest to people. So important metrics or individual projects that have been worked on. But all visual management platforms provide a singular purpose, which is highlighting abnormal conditions so that we can address problems immediately. They represent an immediacy and a communication across people in a hopefully live action animated way that we're going to take a look at how we can explore. So there are several different kinds of platforms that we can do for visual management, and the platform that we use for that visual management depends on the tool that we're using. I've just got some examples here that I pulled together. So this example down here is what's called a Kamishibai board. It's basically a paper form checklist kind of thing where you see all the red cards here represent tasks that need to be done, whereas green tasks represent things that have been done. So, as Monday goes by, we flip the cards. And it's not just about me keeping track of my tasks, because these might all be tasks I'm responsible for doing every day, but it lets everyone else know if I've been doing those things. And they don't have to ask me, they can just look. And that's where the real power of visual management comes in. It speaks to us as human beings, as visual animals that respond to things visually. It's very easy to look at this and at a glimpse know how things are going. And that communication power is something that visual management can really bring to the fore. As very familiar, this is the coaching dashboard that she's been using for our coaching sessions, and it represents a great example of a digital platform as a whiteboard. So digital whiteboards exist in multiple platforms and different mechanisms, but they can do a lot of the work that the in-person dashboards used to do, but we have trouble with in these hybrid or teleworking capacities. Another great example, and Justin just sent this to me today, he's tracking local fiscal recovery fund certifications, and he's using a Power BI dashboard. And these things are interactable, but the key thing is that they show important information and tell you where the body of work still lies. And the important thing is that it communicates that not on a in-person update mechanism, but on a when I want to know as a manager what's going on, I can look on it. When I want to know as a team member what's going on, I can look at it on a schedule that works for me. And it communicates information in a way that in a one-on-one talk or in a team-wide check-in where you might just have 5 minutes to give an update, you really can't get that in depth with it. My kids are home today, so I apologize if you hear any screaming. All right, so we're going to be focusing today on Kanban. So Kanban is very simply about visual signals and cards. These individual cards represent individual projects or applications, and they help people quickly at a glance understand what's going on. They can represent the work of a team. They can represent the work of an individual. There are layers to Kanban that we're just going to be glimpsing today that I think are really, really interesting. But at its root, it's just a bunch of titles and information, all sharply condensed and isolated into these buckets. So the key feature of the Kanban system is these buckets. They go by a lot of names, and depending on the platform you're using, it can change. We're going to be looking mostly at Microsoft Planner, which is a tool that exists for all of us with the Office 365 suite. It is reliant on having a team in order to build one, and we're going to talk about how you can do that, as well as going in depth on the features that it provides. So you have these columns. Again, these are called buckets in Microsoft Planner, but each column represents an activity that we can compile this information in different ways, but the most basic and most useful way to picture this is a workflow, where each column of work or each bucket represents a step in the workflow. Because what that allows us to do is it allows us to take these cards, which represent individual projects, and move them to the next phase when it happens, so that anyone coming to look at this Kanban board can look at it and go, these are the tasks we have sitting in the wait list. We don't have anything in process review. maybe we should talk about the things that are in the wait list and put them in the process review phase. After they finish the process review, they go to the initial development phase. And through this, we can underscore a couple of goals that we're going to be talking about a little bit later. But at a fundamental level, they can be very simple. So maybe you have a bucket that says to do, a bucket that says in progress, a bucket that says complete. But it can also represent a much more complex task. And it also ties in with a lot of Office 365 products that allows for some really cool automation and some really cool efficiencies that we can tap into. Let's take a little bit of a deeper look at Planner itself. So there's a lot of things on this board. This is an example of my Microsoft Planner board. In this case, I don't actually have the buckets arranged in a process-oriented approach. I have them grouped more by the category of work that they represent. But we're going to take a look at some of the features that these individual cards have. So you could see various tasks isolated as cards. So for example, this was back when I was assisting with some AID succession planning. I was working on help build the Veil MOU. I was developing this very lean management training. And each one of these things represents a discrete task that I'm working on, but it also helps me track how well I'm moving through those things. So I have a couple of things in boxes here. So one of the things that you can do in Microsoft Planner is that you can add attachments to individual cards. So if you have documentation that's relevant to a project that you want to keep track of, you can either link the document itself or you can provide links to documents. Now, that's something that I found really useful as we move in this remote work environment. A lot of times it's easy to lose track because back when we were getting a bunch of emails with attachments, it was really easy to keep track of those attachments. I have a Power Automate script that automatically grabs attachments and saves them to my computer. But a lot of times we're getting now links to collaborative documents, right? Because they're linked to the cloud or SharePoint links to files. This allows you to add those links. So whenever I'm working on a project, I know I can come here and find that link. I don't have to save the email because I've got it tied to these individual tasks. There are other relevant items here. So for example, we can add not just, and it actually shows examples of the documents you have linked if you've got them. So you can sort of see at a glance to make sure it's the document that you want. You can link multiple documents to these tasks. So Planner is an online tool. There is no local application that you can download, but we're going to take a look at ways that you can access it both in Microsoft Teams and office.planner.com. If you click the 9 dots associated with any Office 365 tool, you can find Planner in the list of applications. So you log into it just like you would any other Office 365 application. You can add checklists. So for example, at this point in developing the lean management training, I still had to develop this particular training in visual management, lean meetings, coaching, RBA, strategic planning. As I complete them, I can check them off the list and they'll show that they're being completed. So I've got 0 of 5 left to do here. I completed 1 of 1 task right here. It keeps track of those. You can add descriptions. And what's really cool too is you can add comments on these things. So if other people have thoughts or feelings on a particular task, it also becomes a collaborative space. And that's where Kanban is really powerful. It is useful individually, but it is most powerful as a team effort. It allows managers to track folks. And where that's really useful is right here. You'll notice that each of these has these little pictures underneath it. These are people that have been assigned to tasks. I use it to track who's the principal that I'm working with on this project, because as the lean manager, I'm working in a lot of different divisions on a lot of different work. And it allows me to keep track of who's the main person that I need to work with on this. In this particular project right here, it's Shalini. Caitlin working on the lean project management for a project that we were working on. clean water report efficiency. I've got my my 2 green belts that are facilitating this event, as well as myself because I'm helping to work on it. It allows me to really easily keep track of who I'm working with on these projects. If you're a manager, it allows you to see who's working on stuff, but it also allows you to assign people to tasks. In addition to having buckets, which can help define workload either by process or by workload groupings, we also have access to tags. So you can, in some cases, assign multiple tags, but it allows an extra dimension to the work you're doing. So for example, if you've got a particular kind of thing, so for example, I can have a facilitation tag that says, I'm facilitating this, 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 and this. So it says these are facilitation type tasks. And those might only be in the planning phase. They might be in the implementation phase where I'm actively working on a post-facilitation lean implementation. So you can use tags to add extra information on top of a bunch of other information that we can track. So this is an example of some additional information that gets tracked in these individual task cards. This little alarm bell right here says urgent. So I want to make sure that I keep track of all my urgent tasks. You can actually set different tiers of importance for individual tasks. This little half circle right here says it's in progress. I'm working on it. If I wasn't working on it, you see it just shows up here as an empty circle. You can set due dates, and it glows bright red when it's past due. So it's really easy to at a glance say, what am I behind on? What do I need to follow up on? What's really important and what's critical about all visual management systems is that they're all about communication, fast and efficient. And so one of the things about doing all this, if we're diligent about assigning people to tasks, if we're setting due dates, is that we don't have to group it by bucket. This is the default view, but you can actually group it a lot of different ways. So you can group it by assign to. So if you're overseeing a team, you can at a glance click on assign to and see, okay, 2 of my team members are at capacity while 3 more of my members have a little extra capacity. So I know when I assign tasks, I can assign it to them. You can group it by progress and say, we're working on a dozen projects. We've got another half dozen in the hopper. We can group it by due date. We can group it by labels. We can group it by priority. So I can just look at my most important tasks if I need to. By grouping those things by priority, I can easily see which ones are past due. There's a lot of different ways to group and visualize this data in a way that managers can gain a lot of benefit from at an instant. And on top of all of that, all this information can be exported as an Excel document. So if the commissioner asks you for that update on all of the projects that are happening at all times, it's really, really easy to just print that file out and send it on. So it's a really effective communication tool. Or you could just share the board itself and let them look at it and review information or provide comments on key important tasks. You can provide comments on any or all of these. By default, the functionality is if someone comments on a card, it will send that as an email to everyone that is in the team. I don't love that, but I'm sure there are teams that are smaller that would benefit from that type of experience where every time somebody makes a comment on it, it becomes a collaborative space where we can work on projects together instead of all wondering what everyone else is working on. So one of the most interesting things as a manager to take away from this is it introduces something called work in progress limits. And the idea being that individual staff have capacities in terms of how much work they can handle. And if you are having work progress through certain categories of work, you can look at it and go, whether by an individual level and say, this particular staff person is overstressed, this particular person has capacity, you can balance that workload, but you can also balance it in terms of workflow. So if we've got the buckets set up as individual categories of workflow and things stack up on a particular task, for example, one of the areas that I'm using a Kanban board for is tracking A&R online projects. And it's really easy to look at that and go, we are having a lot of projects stack up on one particular phase. And it's a really easy way to look at that and go, we need additional support in this one phase in order to have these things moving efficiently through the production. Because a lot of the time that we spend in the state of Vermont with the projects that we have is not it's being worked on, but slowly. It's that it's not being worked on. It's on the desk. It's to be done. And Caitlin raises an excellent point that schedule view and planner is particularly helpful. Absolutely right. So when the work in progress limit is reached, no new tasks can enter that state. So we don't send things to a state where it's going to sit on somebody's desk. We can take actions to help enable that workflow. And what it allows us to do is develop something like a pull system. So capacity is maintained by grabbing a task when it has the capacity to be worked on. And it creates much less inefficiency because fewer tasks are sitting around waiting. So I mentioned visibility before. I want to highlight a few key points of visibility that make Kanban systems in particular so powerful. So one of the really great advantages to establishing those buckets as process steps is you put those outline items there like it's an SOP. So each bucket represents a task, and basically it enables everyone to follow the SOP without having to refer to the SOP. People are tracking their tasks naturally, but they're using the Kanban board to obey that SOP because each task lists what happens in that step, and you know a task is ready to be in that step because it's been moved. So it's really easy to at a glance follow and practice according to SOPs, especially for entire teams. I'm sure many of you have teams that are doing different things in different ways. This can really help get everyone together on the same page, acting out according to SOP. It encourages teamwork to give their opinion on how to improve current processes. So a lot of times, one member of a team could be in the dark compared to the rest of the team and the things that they're working on. But if that knowledge is spread around and everyone knows what's being worked on, it allows expertise that they might have that might be relevant to that project to come to the fore. If a team has a Kanban board and everyone is looking at it, following it, I can look at it and go, all right, so I know Greg is working on a project relating to something that I did as part of my lean work. I can offer him some insights that I have on that team or that work in a way that I might not be able to do, or we might not have time to do in a meeting where we're providing our updates manually. The other big advantage is elimination of updating reporting. So in a world where everyone's using Kanban systems, you do not have to have big, long meetings where everyone says what they're doing, because what they're doing is on the Kanban board. And everyone is using that to track and review and look at information. You're not doing that work at all. So if you're not doing that, what are you doing with that time? Are you still collaborating? Are you still working together? Absolutely. So when you're having those meetings, you're doing different things. So for example, you might be organizing priorities, discussing what the priorities that are assigned to tasks are, if they're appropriate, and following through on them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about some advanced opportunities, but I want to make sure I got time to put this out there. So if you want to start using Microsoft Planner, here's what you need to do. Create a team if you don't already have one. A Microsoft Planner board has to be created in a team. You want to try and have the team encompass everyone that you're going to assign to tasks. So that Kanban board I showed is actually a DEC-wide team because I work with people across DEC, so I need to be able to grab people and put them in there. You can go ahead and create a plan. Outline the process. So if you have an SOP or something that allows you to outline the process, use those buckets to outline that process. And then go ahead and create your tasks, or have your staff create tasks. And then you can assign them or have themselves assigned to work. And it's a really easy way to get a glimpse of what everyone's doing. Staff update the tasks as they make progress. It becomes part of their work to take 2 seconds to take a task and move it over to the next phase, or put their updates in the task so that everyone can see what's going on. And when you have your check-ins, because you'll still have check-ins, it's reframing that conversation from what you're doing to what are your obstacles, what are your hurdles, what are the things in the way, what's preventing you from moving this from one bucket to the next. I've noticed that it's been sitting there for a while, or I noticed we're having a bunch of tasks pile up on this stage. What's going on? Why is that happening? It's shifting the orientation away from what is going on broadly with a project to I'm noticing deviations and things not working the way they're intended to. It allows us to practice lean as leaders because we can look at the board and know right away something is off, something is wrong, something is not working as intended. And we're having those conversations instead of, well, what are you doing? What projects are you working on? I already know that because they've been updating their Kanban board. I want to know, why have we been stuck there for 3 weeks? Is somebody not getting back to you? Let me support you. Let me help you get past that. So that's really where this stuff gets powerful. So I want to, that's basic Kanban systems. I want to talk very, very briefly about some advanced stuff that you can tap into if you really get into it. So because it's part of Office 365, you can do things with Power Automate, and you can actually use Power Automate to automatically update Planner. So that project that I had listed with Shalini, we have a bunch of triggering actions that are happening from Microsoft Forms that are automatically creating tasks in Planner and setting them to the correct categories. She doesn't have to go in and move those tasks at all. All she has to do is go about her business, do things like submitting forms and the system that we built, and it will automatically track it so that she can see what status every project is on, and so everyone can see the status of those projects. And she doesn't have to update them at all. Planner integrates I mentioned that having a team is kind of required to have a plan. That's absolutely true. And you can also add it as a tab in your Microsoft Teams. So if you're already working as a team in Microsoft Teams, adding Planner is super, super easy. You can just go there right now, click plus to add a tab at the top. Go ahead and add Planner. You might have to search to find it or expand it to find it, but you can go ahead and add Planner. It'll prompt you to create a new one. So you can start right now if you've already got your team together in Microsoft Teams to build a planner and start collaborating today. And as you develop these things, we start talking about identifying sources of delay, revising problematic processes, and define actions to develop an understanding and improve flow. So our meetings become about improvement and about overcoming obstacles rather than just status updates. So imagine what that 70% could be done if it was focused on improvement rather than just catching everybody up. That's the vision of Kanban, and that's the value that it can deliver. Now, I know that's a lot, and it might be new to a lot of you. I want you to know that I'm here as a resource if you're looking at getting into Kanban and don't know where to get started, or just need someone to help walk you through the beginning steps. Don't hesitate to email me or send me a message on Teams. We are at time right now, but if anybody has any questions, go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, I'll see you afterwards. Okay. Well, thank you all so much. Yeah, Josh.
I just want to say thanks. That's an interesting introduction. I just appreciate it.
Absolutely. Helen.
Hi, you just had a comment in the chat from Gianna, and she wanted to know if it was possible to add repetitive tasks. And I confidently replied yes, and then I realized I was talking about to do. So maybe you know if it does.
So the way I get to repetitive tasks is by capitalizing on Power Automate, because Power Automate is really powerful and it works really well with Office 365, including Planner. So I set automated tasks, which create new tasks. So one of the ways that I create my quarterly updating mechanism, so I oversee a bunch of lean projects. I want quarterly updates on those projects. I don't create those tasks. I have an automated tasks that run every 3 months that creates a brand new task based on what's in a particular bucket. And it will send people notifications every quarter that I need updates. And when people provide those updates, it auto completes the task. So I can at a glance see, who do I still need updates from, and how close is that to done? And it will send reminder emails if those tasks still haven't been completed. And if they have been completed, those people don't get emails. And it's based entirely on who is tied to the task and automated tasks that are running every quarter in Power Automate. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that is capable through utilizing these tools, and it's been a pleasure to talk to you about those today. So thank you all for your time, and if you have any questions afterwards, don't hesitate to send me a message. All right, thank you all so much, and have a great day.